In a show built on intellectual quirks, deep-cut science references, and awkward social misunderstandings, young Sheldon sought to provide a more grounded and emotional portrait of one of television's most iconic eccentrics. But while the prequel was often poignant, hilarious, and surprisingly insightful, one character arc in young Sheldon took a bizarre turn, and in doing so, unintentionally undercut what could have been the spin-off's most impactful twist. We're talking, of course, about Pastor Jeff. When young Sheldon first introduced Pastor Jeff Hodgkins, he was a well-meaning, if stereotypically naive, Southern Baptist preacher. His relationship with Sheldon, the miniature atheist and junior theoretical physicist, became one of the most delightfully odd couplings in the early seasons. Sheldon's constant challenges to doctrine, from physics-based refutations of Genesis to logical breakdowns of the concept of original sin, made for amusing and often heartwarming clashes with the pastor. Pastor Jeff's arc should have stayed in the vein of comedy and subtle spiritual evolution. Instead, the show leaned into an increasingly strange and inconsistent development of his character. Somewhere between Season 3 and Season 6, Pastor Jeff stopped being a foil for Sheldon's logic and morphed into a caricature of fundamentalist dogma. His once quirky but patient demeanor turned into paranoia, judgment, and, by the end, cartoonish extremes that left little room for nuance, and that's where the damage began. Because buried beneath young Sheldon's charm was its ticking time bomb, the inevitable death of George Sr., Sheldon's father, a tragic note established years earlier in The Big Bang Theory. This event, while never dramatized in the original show, loomed over every heartwarming moment in young Sheldon. Fans of the original knew what was coming, and when the show finally approached George's death in Season 7, it had an opportunity to pull the rug from under everyone, by revealing something new, something that recontextualized Sheldon's adult life in a profound way. But that twist, that dramatic moment of truth, it was undercut by the complete narrative disintegration of Pastor Jeff's arc. Here's why. The groundwork had been laid for a potential twist that would turn the audience's understanding of Sheldon's world upside down. Subtle hints throughout the series, George Sr.'s long hours, his unexplained absences, tension with Mary, and emotional distance, opened the door to possibilities that went beyond the simple heart attack caused from the Big Bang Theory. What if George hadn't just died? What if there had been a deeper tragedy, a scandal, a secret Sheldon never understood, or one he had willfully ignored? This is where Pastor Jeff could have been crucial. By escalating Pastor Jeff into an ultra-pious, judgmental authority, the show positioned him as a potential antagonist in the final arc. Imagine this. A falling out between George and Mary driven not by infidelity, but by religious control. Pastor Jeff, convinced of George's moral failings, or even trying to police Mary's behavior too tightly, pressures Mary to cut ties with George. The church community becomes a source of division rather than comfort. Suddenly, the Coopers are caught in a spiritual political spiral. In this version of events, George's death isn't just a personal tragedy, it's the climax of an emotional Cold War, with Pastor Jeff at the center. The twist? Sheldon's long-held perception of his father is shattered. Not because George was worse than he thought, but because the church, and perhaps even Mary's blind faith, helped drive his father away. But instead of exploring this thematic depth, Pastor Jeff's character devolved into comic relief. He becomes increasingly absurd, dealing with personal marital drama, church politics, and exaggerated reactions to Sheldon's atheism. Rather than leaning into the spiritual conflict within the Cooper household, the show sidestepped it in favor of easy laughs and outlandish behavior. The complexity disappeared. This decision doesn't just waste a rich character, it ruins the potential for one of the most powerful twists in the young Sheldon timeline. That Sheldon's adult beliefs, his emotional detachment, and his discomfort with religion and family all trace back to a misunderstood tragedy in his youth. The twist could have reframed the Big Bang Theory itself, offering new context to why Sheldon is the way he is. Why he's both emotionally stunted and aggressively rational. Why he clings to science not just as a pursuit, but as a shield. Instead, we get a tidy, safe version of events, with Pastor Jeff reduced to a punchline. It's not that every character needs to carry symbolic weight. Young Sheldon had plenty of room for humor. But when a series is built on foreshadowing a known future, every character has the potential to influence that trajectory. Pastor Jeff, as both a spiritual authority and a major presence in Mary's life, was uniquely positioned to act as either a villain or a tragic hero in the final act. By turning him into a joke, the show robbed itself of its own most interesting weapon. Moreover, this arc, or lack thereof, diminishes Mary's complexity. Her faith has always been a cornerstone of her identity, and her tension with Sheldon often reflects real-world struggles between belief and intellect. If Pastor Jeff had become more manipulative or intrusive, pushing Mary deeper into dogma while alienating her from her husband, it would have challenged Mary in ways the show never dared. Her reckoning could have mirrored Sheldon's, realizing too late that faith, when unexamined, can hurt as much as heal. But that reckoning never comes. And when George dies, almost off-screen, we're left not with emotional devastation or shocking revelations, but with a sense of narrative inevitability. A twist that never twists. In the end, young Sheldon remains a smart, funny, and often touching show. It succeeded in many ways that The Big Bang Theory never could. But it also pulled its punches. By choosing safety over complexity, and comedy over catharsis, it undermined its own ambition. And Pastor Jeff, once a surprising and layered figure, became the most glaring example of that lost potential. Young Sheldon didn't need to be a tragedy, but it could have been profound. Instead, it settled for quirky. And in doing so, it robbed viewers of the twist that could have made both shows unforgettable. Let me know if you want this in a particular tone, like satirical, emotional, or more analytical, or if you'd like this formatted for publication, blog post, script, or video essay.